worked for a wilderness school for a while, and it was run by an ex-Carmelite monk. His wife was an ex-Carmelite nun. And Elvin, I think his name was. Anyway, he spent 7 years in silence. He was a monk for 12 years, and he started this wilderness school. And something he could do, he could watch a group of adolescents walk across a field and tell you what was happening in that group. Conflicts, were they happy, were they jammed up? And he would say all the time, young people, they have rice paper souls. And over my own life, I've learned that we all have rice paper souls. There's a place in us that's tender, and we need to be gentle with ourselves. So today, we're going to talk about self-compassion. Yeah. Look, consciousness is a house of mirrors. It is easy to get turned around. It's easy to be hard on yourself, even when you are empathetic and caring towards others. But as RuPaul said, a wise man, if you don't love yourself, honey, how in the hell are you going to love somebody else? And we've learned that a lack of self-love makes my love of others more than a bit ingenuine, inauthentic. What's it based on? Self-compassion. What psychology has learned is that those who lack self-compassion often exhibit a pattern of unhealthy relationships. So what is this? Simply put, self-compassion is the practice of being understanding and compassionate towards yourself. And there's a huge aspect of Buddha's mindfulness in this aspect of life, and this way of paying attention. Living in the present moment with openness and curiosity and without judgment. Boy, is that Buddhist. And yet, psychology has learned that that's a huge piece of self-compassion. We need to find a way to be kind and gentle with ourselves, especially in times of suffering, in times of feeling inadequate or feeling like a failure. This is where self-kindness comes in. This is where a knowledge that there's a common humanity. We all feel disappointed at some point. We all fail. We're all imperfect. And a mindful approach, and again, that word mindful is something that just keeps coming up. It's about non-judgmental, curious, observant, and not overly identifying with the experience. It's an amazing thing if you can stop for a minute and listen to your self-talk. Jesus said, unless you have the eyes of a child, you cannot see the kingdom of heaven. Moody Blues sing, with the eyes of a child you will see. And psychology has shown that if we learn to treat ourselves as a child, to see with the eyes of a child, then wow, something new. You know, it's rice, paper, soul. You begin to wake to this tender place in your own life. And then we're back at mindfulness again. When we get swept away by a barrage of these negative self-talk, and it all happens to all of us. 3 a.m. is a great time for that, by the way. Becoming aware, just stopping and becoming aware of it is an antidote in and of itself. Awareness. It's a trippy thing. And yet, when we want to learn to love ourselves, to be compassionate, these are pieces that we need to get. And I think another piece is to realize we're not alone. All humans feel and are imperfect. A wise person once said, so many believe they're broken or screwing up when actually we're all fumbling our way through this scriptless existence together. You know, think of that as a root thought. Just realizing we're all fumbling. You know, it's this piece that's amazing if we would pay attention to it. So giving ourselves permission to be imperfect. Now, there's some other aspects I'm going to try to lighten up, but I want to have my co-hosts weigh in. Bob Hayes is coming from Florida. Marianne is coming from Spokane Valley, Washington. I'm on the hill in the south in Spokane. So, Marianne, I'll start with you. Self-compassion, is it important? What's with this?
Well, I think self-compassion is extremely important. Just in, it's so interesting that this follows our last week's discussion about projection, because if we can't love ourselves, then we're going to be projecting that out to everyone we meet. And you mentioned the idea that we are we're gonna over-identify with the failures of everyone else that's out there, and if we are continually basically beating ourselves up, then our world becomes one of correction, and never achieving what we really want to do and want to be. And when we can be compassionate with ourselves, when we can look at ourselves as human beings, imperfect human beings, and be able to say, I may have gotten it wrong, but I know better now, and I'm going to do better now. And you mentioned something I think that's really, really important about treating ourselves as a child and seeing ourselves as a child. Many of us grew up with a distorted idea of what it means to be treated as a child, be seen and not heard. It's always, the idea that you have to spare the rod, spoil the child. Those kind of ideas that. So when you say treat ourselves as a child, treat ourselves lovingly as a child should be treated as someone, so I think the idea that love has to play a big part of this. And if we can't, I love, your quote there from RuPaul, if we can't love ourselves, how can we love someone else? But I think, again, that goes back to what we talked about last week, that projection. So when we can love ourselves, then we can give that out into the world as well. But it begins with us. I don't know, that was a bit rambling, but that was my thoughts.
Hit center for me. Bob?
Well, I'm going to start off with my favorite word, balance. If we're not able to have self-love, then we're paralyzed. Then we don't try to do anything. We know we're going to fail, just like Marianne was just saying. So we've got to have a certain amount of that. But at the same time, we've got to balance that with the ability to set certain standards for ourselves, to not let ourselves off the hook. That we have to realize that part of the journey is to be in a constant state of improvement, of striving to do better. So when we don't get there, we've got to be willing to forgive ourselves for failure, but not to forgive ourselves for not trying again and trying a little bit harder. So again, it's that balance that is really required.
Yeah. And I think that, there are ways to get that. I mean, one of my ways, I think life is goofy. Sometimes I hate living inside my head, and sometimes I'm delighted by it. And I think the full spectrum is just goofy as hell. And learning to laugh at oneself is a way to loosen the moment and the experiences bond on yourself. I want to go through real quick 8 pieces of some techniques. Check your self-talk. Stop. Give yourself a moment to look at what you're saying to yourself. 2, forgive yourself. My God, we all screw up. Get over it. I always say crow, as bad as it tastes, it's a lot worse cold than it is warm, so eat it quick. Forgive yourself. 3, practice loving kindness. It's a meditation. It's a way of facing the world and being in the world and seeing the world and seeing yourself in it when you begin to project that loving kindness, if you will. Also, and Marianne, you touched on this, celebrate your small achievements. life is basically full of these accomplishments, and the thing that sticks out is the places where we miss it. I took a memory test a year ago for, as an old guy, they make you remember stuff. And they gave me 3 things to remember. And 40 minutes later, I can only remember 2 of them. But since then, I've forgotten the 2 that I remembered, and I can't forget the one that I didn't remember. So there, be good with yourself. Another piece, express gratitude. Be thankful. Look around you. And, I go to the supermarket. I hate going to the supermarket, but once I get there, I feel like I'm one of the richest people in the world. I mean, come on. There's a life stream for every one of those products that you have access to. That, to me, is a place of gratitude. I think practicing acts of kindness for yourself. Ask yourself, what do I need right now at this moment? I mean, some have called self-care a form of healthy narcissism. There is a place where you have to put yourself in the center and take care of it. And again, come back to mindfulness. And a final one that I'll just say is, if you need help, ask somebody. I don't think we do this by ourselves. I think Mary Ann touched upon it. We're taught to self-deprecate ourselves, to put ourselves down, to keep ourselves down. And this whole thing is to do just the opposite, to get you up. And I mean up in every way, that you begin to see what constitutes true well-being and true health. And I don't think we're the metric of that, but there's a million metrics out there. We've talked about it, Carl Jung, Freud, Adler, even if we're talking to psychologists, the sociologists, that there is so much out there. Joseph Campbell, these are people that have shown us what the metric is. And we keep coming back to it. The golden rule sits right in the center of it. And if we can only apply the golden rule to ourselves as well, I think the world will get better.
I think so. It is, yes, I agree. And I think everything begins with us and what we take out into the world. And I think, Bob, you touched on this too. The other part of this is when we are doing this, the self-talk, right? And it's negative. And we want to flip that around and make it positive to us. We also have to be truthful, and we have to face exactly what has happened, our part in it. And I don't think self-love means that we have to be just a cheerleader for ourselves. We have to be that's part of it, but we also have to assess, did I cause some pain? Did I do something? And Red Hawk, you touched on this in the opening. If you have to eat crow, eat it right away, right? But and you can only do that when you're being honest with yourself and you're being truthful. And I think that once we can learn to be truthful with ourselves, it doesn't mean that we failed. It doesn't mean that. It means we made a mistake, and that we can go forward and we can correct that. We can atone for those things, and we can act differently going forward. If we never go through those processes, we are going to keep repeating that same pattern over and over.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the whole key, isn't it? It's to grow.
Right.
And how we grow, you can't chase your tail in tighter and tighter circles and expect to grow.
In a sense, we kind of need to be a coach for ourselves. Mary Ann, you just mentioned cheerleader, but I think maybe a coach is a better metaphor. A good coach is going to point out where the person is not achieving their goals and what they can do to move closer to those goals, and also praise the person when they do achieve those goals. So again, it's a true coach really loves his team or his athlete that he's engaged with, and you see it over and over again in various sports figures who, toward the end of their careers or later on in life, they go back and say, "Wow, I had these coaches, or I had this coach, or I had this teacher that really was able to change my life and put me on the path that has led to all of the achievements that I've been able to make in my life." And again, it's that balance between praising when there's good, pointing out when there's not so good, and providing a path to do better.
Because they really do want the best for us. And maybe that's the attitude we need to have for ourselves. We want the best for ourselves. And how do we foster that?
Yeah, that's like the ultimate expression of love.
Right.
Well, and there's two pieces to this that you brought out, and one is truth, and the other is how you respond to that. Marianne, if we screw up and we hurt somebody, that's the truth of it. And how we respond to that, both inside and outside, is a huge piece of this relational semi-permeability of us of being that each of us are.
Yeah.
I have to say, I can't remember who said it, but I love the quote, so many believe they're broken or screwing up when actually we are all fumbling our way through this scriptless existence together. I have to say, in ministry, the word broken comes up over and over, and I always say, I don't think anything's broken. I think we're all an algorithm. And, it keeps coming up, go this way or don't go this way. It's pretty simple when you put it in those terms. And when you get something wrong, when you hurt somebody, that's a don't go this way. That's how you respond and move the thing to go this way. And I think that's and maybe it was my computer program. If not this, then go here.
Yeah. Well, and I think social media has, kind of to our detriment, where we look at other people and why isn't our life like theirs? We're seeing intimately into other people's lives that we may never have seen before. And so it becomes easy for us to try to live up to a standard that is set externally rather than getting to know ourselves and setting an internal standard and live up to that. And that's self-compassion. That, I think, is when you can identify what are your values. Do you value the golden rule? And what do you want to live up to? And I think that's compassion for yourself.
Yeah, and you put a big piece in there that's important to me, and that's that it's not keeping the same metric, but it's growing the metric expansively in depth and height-wise. It's learning a wider range, a wider broad bandwidth of existence for yourself and the world, to let it in, to be able to be confused by it, to grapple with it, to fumble through it, and to embrace that at some level, I think. And I think that is part of the journey. And I think this self-compassion, the journey is impossible. You can't grow without this piece, I don't believe. You can grow in bits and pieces, but if you're not practicing some of these self-compassion aspects, you hinder your own growth. And many people, they have their metric and they guard it, and this is it, and this is what it is. And Marianne, that's what I got out of what you just said, is that we're growing a whole new measure of what is what and how we appropriate that in our lives. So,
yeah, I think if we're truly moving forward in our journey, if we're truly growing, then that metric itself has to change and has to grow. yeah, we want to treat ourselves like a child, but we also want to treat ourselves like an adult. And we want to be able to be a fully functioning person. And that requires the metric to evolve as we evolve as an individual.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
go ahead, Marianne.
No, I was just agreeing with what Bob just said. Yeah.
And, I think growing is literally the only game in town. And what my little study of self-compassion has brought me is that this is how we water ourselves. This is how we take care of ourselves, if you will. That I keep thinking of the spider plant. If you water all the little spiders, it'll die. You have to water the mother plant, and that's what we're talking about here. So the metaphor of the moment is you are the mother spider plant, and you should water yourself. The babies will take care of themselves.
Well, the babies will thrive based on, and I guess that's the same thing. Our communities will thrive based on what we put out into it. And if we're putting out love and compassion, then that is what is going to manifest out in our world, right? And I always go back to, this all begins at home, and it starts with us, and then what. And then what we take out into the world is going to be based on that.
Yeah. Well, it's an integral process. It's not me autonomous here by myself and the world out there. Again, that semi-permeability, we are connected in all these itty-bitty ways that we just take for granted, and we live in it. It's like the fish in the water. It's all around us. But to become intentionally involved in that is really what this process is about. And I love in my reading and in more articles, they related it back to Buddhism, be here now. The whole concept of paying attention. What did Buddha say? The three most important things in a spiritual journey are attention, attention, attention. And that's not easy, to pay attention, to stop yourself and look at what's going on inside of you, and then to be honest with it, and then to be compassionate and forgiving with yourself for having that experience and having put into it.
Right? Yeah, because you're actually human, and you're not perfect, and we want to be perfect. We want to do things right, and that's another thing, is what's right.
Yeah.
Well,
and that's the whole key, I think, with Brené Brown, the gift of imperfection, is to realize that it's precisely there that we can find the most meaning, if you will, the most connection, the most relational honesty and authenticity. And how do you get to that place? Again, every spiritual teaching talks about being in accord. And now we're talking about self-compassion as one aspect of management. I don't like that word. But, driving your chariot, whatever metaphor you want to go. But it's one aspect of how we lead I'm coming back to Bob's favorite word, a balanced life. And if without this piece, I don't believe you can have a balanced life. So listeners, come on, love yourself, be compassionate, forgive yourself, give yourself a break, because you know what? You deserve it. You're a human being, and that's inherent in my mind. That's inherent in one of the properties of being a human being. So we're getting close to the end of our time. Bob, final comments?
I think you've covered it pretty well. I just think that being able to love oneself is being able to forgive oneself, but also being able to set those standards that you want to see in yourself, to hold an image of a better you in your mind in everything you do. You may not always get to that point, but it's something you strive toward. And as long as you keep striving, then you can forgive yourself for not making it every time, because you know you're going to try again, and you'll get a little farther next time.
Yeah. I want to say hooray for failure. If we put it in perspective, I think that's probably it. Again, it seems to me we're an algorithm, trying to self-correct. I think of how the eye evolved through light sensitivity and photosynthesis, and how the eye is an amazing thing, and I've been spending a lot of time on my eyes lately, so I can attest to that. Marianne, final comments?
I think that forgiving ourselves, and we touched very briefly on the idea of gratitude, but living with gratitude for who and what we are both very, very important to this self-compassion piece. But there's also something I've been struggling with. And it's weird that I just used that word. But I used to always flippantly say the struggle is real and that it's difficult. And I am trying now to reimagine that and say the struggle is over, that I don't have to struggle. What I have to do is be compassionate, have gratitude, forgive myself, and grow. And you can do that through other means rather than making it a battle. So if I make a mistake, I love your algorithm analogy, so that if I make a mistake, that's all it is. I saw this meme out on social media recently, and it was just perfect. It said, it showed two pictures of the Earth right next to each other. They look side by side, and it said, here's the world before you made an error, and here's the world after you made an error, right? And it's like we take ourselves too seriously, and let's just fix what we're doing as we go along, and it doesn't have to be this horrible, horrible thing. So,
amen. And in our discussion today, the words that I'm switching out are fumbling versus struggle. Because I keep thinking of some of the passes in the basketball and NCAA stuff. I've been watching these games, which surprises me because I've never been into basketball before. But some of the fumble, they're all fumbling. They're all trying to pull these things off, and they do these amazing fumbles that end up reaping great rewards. So I'm trading out my struggle for my fumbling. And
I like it.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, dear. I'm in the service, right? And I'm just about as naive as could be. And I'm on a bus in New York City. And I think I've shared this story before. And there's a guy in a robe across the aisle from me. And I'm looking out the window. And there's a guy pissing on a corner. Just, he's just taking a leak. And I looked at this guy across the aisle and I said, well, tell me we're not going to hell in a handbasket. And the guy in the robe, who turns out to be some Buddhist dude, he looks out the window and he goes, or maybe it's just a man urinating on the street. We do stuff. We add meaning. And meaning is an amazing thing, the way it comes and goes, the way it has a horizon that shoots all the way to the edge and then comes back real close. And there's a science around that. It's called phenomenology. And that's where we're going to go. That's a big word, I know, phenomenology. But it really has to do with meaning and how we appropriate it, and how perception and meaning and context all fit together. Woo-hoo! You're doing it all the time. All of us are. We're adding meaning to the world. We're projecting that meaning. Oh, my friends, blessings. And until next week, Hang in there and be good to yourself.